Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Spring 2022 Research Experience student presentations. Our students that will be presenting tonight have spent the past 10 weeks rigorously studying a research project of their choosing. They drove all of the data, they did all of the research, and they worked alongside with a mentor in order to help them along the way. Each of our students will also be published in our Headwaters Science Journal, as well as have opportunities to publish in other avenues. If you would like to participate in a research experience program, we are accepting applications for our summer program. So just visit this website and you can click on the registration button and it will take you to the page to get all set up. If you have questions about this program, you can email me directly at jen@headwaterscienceinstitute.org. So my name is Jen Cotton. I am the Program and Outreach Manager for Headwaters Science Institute. I have worked here for a few months now. I'm very excited to move through my first round of student presentations. I was a public school educator for over 10 years, working with marine sciences, primarily working in shark research, as well as leading some research students. And joining me today, I have DJ. Hi, DJ.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you? So can you go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody?
Yep, so my name is Daniel Dudek. I've been a science mentor for Headwaters Science Institute for about, a couple years, since 2018. I started working with Headwaters during my master's when I was completing that. I just love the student outreach opportunity and, getting exposed and helping out students complete some, incredible research. Every year it's completely different. The topics are often off the wall. Whatever things that the students come to mind, we help them, complete that, collect the data, analyze the data, and draw conclusions to whatever question they may have. So it's incredibly exciting every year to see, what actually comes out of the program.
Great. Yeah, it is exciting to watch them grow throughout the program as well. So as a mentor, you get to be involved with that process. And it's just such a fulfilling thing. So first up, so DJ was a mentor for a few of our students. So if you would like to, you can go ahead and introduce our first presentation.
Yeah, so first up we have Charlie Benson. He's doing some incredible sort of data-driven research on, the effects of temperature and hurricanes and tropical storms. So I hope all of you are excited to see what he has to present. Hey there, Charlie. You ready?
Yes.
Awesome. Good luck.
So, hello, my name is Charlie Benson. My mentor is Mr. Dudek, and my research project is on the effect of Florida surface temperatures on the intensity and frequency of hurricanes and tropical storms. So, how do I change slides?
Go ahead. I did it for you.
Okay, thank you. So hurricanes are large storms that start out in the water. They are caused by tropical waves, and they can hit landfall with high winds and heavy rainfall and can cause a lot of damage along with many lives being lost. They are highly variable in wind speeds, and the Saffir-Simpson explains and rates these hurricanes from 1 to 5, depending on the wind speeds and wave size produced by the hurricanes. So, tropical storms are hurricanes that do not have the strength of hurricanes with less than 74 miles per hour wind speeds. And over the past 4 decades, since the 1980s, hurricanes have increased a lot in Florida. As you can see on the illustration on the right, you can see many of the hurricane tracks that have hit in the Atlantic. It almost covers Florida with a lot of different points of contact. But along with the hurricane increase in the past 40 years, temperature has also significantly increased in the past 40 years as well. This is mainly due to global warming and the increase of fossil fuels, But there's also this other factor called the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, which has been naturally occurring over thousands of years, and it is a swing in the Atlantic temperature over every 40 to 50 years, and the maximum and minimum have like a 1 degree difference, which is very huge because of the size of the Atlantic Ocean. It would take a lot of heat to be able to heat it up by that much or cool it down. So my research question is, what percentage does surface land temperatures affect hurricane intensity and frequency? And what do these factors over the past 40 years have to do with each other? My independent variable is the surface land temperatures of Florida, and the dependent variable is the hurricane intensity and frequency for the state. My hypothesis is that land surface temperatures will have a significant effect on hurricane frequency and intensity because both of these have been increasing at roughly the same time, and they have been increasing by around the same margin or factor over the past 40 years. So my materials and methods, how I did this was, first, I went up on this website called Weather Underground, which is a massive database of meteorological data which on many different locations around the country. And it looks at and it projects different meteorological data from different international airports, which have been recording data for the past, maybe even some of them even since 1950. So I looked onto the database for Miami International Airport first, and I looked at May of 1980 and found the average temperature for the entire month. Then I went on to June 1980, July 1980, and then I went through all of the months up until November of 1980. And then I repeated this from the years of 1981 to 2020 for 4 decades, and then did this exact same procedure for Tampa International Airport and Pensacola International Airport. Then afterwards, I went onto Wikipedia, and over the past 4 decades, I looked at all the different hurricanes and tropical storms that had an effect on these 3 Florida cities. And whenever one did, I logged it as that month and year, along with the temperature beside it, with some basic information about this. After I found both of these pieces of information, I compiled the data into graphs and then compared the temperature to the amount of hurricanes and tropical storms for each month, as well as how strong each of these hurricanes and tropical storms were. So as you can see from figure 1, I compared each year in a bar graph with the total number of hurricanes and tropical storms that happened, as well as the average temperature. You can see that there's a pretty strong correlation because as one went up, the other went up as well, and vice versa for both going down over the past 40 years, which definitely suggests a good correlation and maybe even a causation. The next one shows even a bit more specific data on the correlation between temperature and the number of hurricanes and tropical storms. This, can you go? The R-squared value is 0.357, which equates to a pretty strong correlation overall. The next figure in figure 3 test temperature and its correlation to hurricane strength, but I'm only testing with hurricanes. This is a lot less of a R-squared value, which means that there's a lot less of a correlation between the 2 factors as there was with frequency and temperature. In figure 4, it can even be determined that as you can see, the R-squared value is 0.02 when the tropical storms are equated to a 0.5 on the Simpson-Saffir scale. And it shows even less of a correlation than with just hurricanes. And then on the 5th figure, on figure 5, the temperature correlation with the hurricane strength for tropical storms were counted as 0 when calculated into the average, which produced one of the lowest R-squared values and the lowest correlation out of all of the graphs, presenting that there may be like less of a correlation when you have tropical storms as 0 than with other metrics when I was calculating them. So for my discussion, the data suggests that there is a really strong correlation and maybe even a causation between the average surface temperature and hurricane frequency. However, there may not be as much of a correlation or a really weak correlation between average temperature and hurricane strength, along with tropical storm strength, as the one with average temperature and frequency had a 0.357 R-squared value, and the hurricane strength had a 0.093. The results only partially compare with my hypothesis, since my original hypothesis was that both the hurricane frequency and the hurricane and tropical storm intensity were affected by and with a correlation to temperature, but only really the hurricane frequency had any major correlation with the temperature, and the intensity of these hurricanes and tropical storms really didn't have as much to do with the temperature. One of the reasons why, with more background research, is that the tropical waves that produce hurricanes are increased when the temperature is higher, which with more tropical waves, you'd have more hurricanes and more tropical storms. But the more tropical storms may not have to do with the intensity of the hurricanes. This doesn't have to do with just Florida, even though I did studies purely in Florida, and it doesn't really even have to go with the United States. This could be in multiple different countries that border the Northern Atlantic, and even across the world, as people can study the how warm it is during a hurricane season, and they may be able to determine how many hurricanes or tropical storms there are based off of that data. And they don't have to be as worried that if a hurricane season is warmer, that there necessarily will be stronger hurricanes and tropical storms, but to keep a little bit of an eye out for that. This will definitely contribute to future research, which can be testing other factors such as water temperature, air pressure, humidity, or even water quality in the area, and how that relates to the frequency of hurricanes and tropical storms. As even that wasn't that strong of a correlation, you could find out what other factors contribute to it, and it is especially could be for future research on the intensity of hurricanes and tropical storms, since there wasn't really much of a correlation with land surface temperature. The other thing I could do is find out like tornadoes and compare those results with hurricanes and how they compare, as well as other Atlantic natural disasters, which could be tidal waves or any other natural disaster really that could be affected by heating patterns such as the Atlantic multidecadal oscillation. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope that this gives you insight into more about hurricane seasons, and maybe you learned something more about hurricane seasons and what to expect for them based off of temperatures for that year.
Oh, thank you, Charlie. That was awesome. In an area where I get hit by hurricanes as well, and it is important to follow a lot of those patterns. So as those of you watching, if you do have any questions for any of our students, go ahead and put it in the comments and we will pop them up for them to answer. Charlie, I do have a question for you.
Yes.
So looking at the land surface temperature and the intensity, do you think that potentially looking at the sea surface temperatures may have had any influence on your research?
You mean like graph factors?
Yeah, so instead of comparing land surface temperatures, potentially looking at sea surface temperatures?
Yeah, so that would be a different thing I could do for future research. And I do think one of the biggest, like, more graphical errors was that many of the years didn't even have a hurricane or tropical storm. So when you look at it on a plot, it brings less of a correlation because it's not as tightly compacted onto the trend line. So that may have some sort of factor with the R squared value and correlation.
Great. And then you mentioned looking at research in other parts of the world. You know, in the Southern Hemisphere, things tend to spin the other direction. So do you think that there might be any influence on the research that you did on other parts of the world?
I think so because, like, it's any place that has hurricanes could look onto this data and get more of a perspective on how temperature has affected it, because many of the places around there may not be the Atlantic multidecadal oscillation, but there definitely is global warming, and that may cause of cause people to fear about hurricanes and that. But it's a realization on, like, what actually is being affected by the temperature and what isn't, such as intensity of these hurricanes and storms.
So someone had a question from you from their 8-year-old brother. So why do hurricanes happen?
So hurricanes happen. I did do some, based off of research, it does happen because of these tropical waves, which are definitely warmer waves. It also happens when it's very warm, when there's very warm waters, and then there's a lot colder, which kind of has more of a which kind of causes more of a convection current to be able to form these hurricanes.
Yep, exactly. All right, DJ, do you have any questions for Charlie?
No, I thought he did an excellent job presenting his research. Yeah. So just for a summary, everyone, he found that, just because temperatures tend to increase, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be an increase in the strength of the storm, but it definitely seems that there's some relationship there with the frequency of the hurricanes. So, that's not good as well.
Yeah, and something really great is where Charlie, this is like a personal thing for where you're located. So that's awesome that you applied your abilities to do this research with something that can impact your own life. So very good job. Thank you so much for
Thank you, Ms.
sharing
Cotton.
that
And
information
thank
with
you for
us.
listening for my report.
Excellent job. All right. So DJ, do you want to go ahead and introduce Keon?
Yeah, sure. So one thing before moving on, I just want to point out that during when he was presenting his hypothesis, he initially he thought that temperature would increase both the frequency and the strength of the hurricane. So when you collect all your data and you come to your conclusions, it may not necessarily be what you initially thought. So it's always nice to collect your own data and come to your own conclusions as well. So that's a good point to bring up that he forgot to talk about, but that was a really unique finding.
And I appreciated that as a prior marine science teacher, because there is a very large misconception about temperature and the formation of hurricanes, as well as the intensity of them. So no, that's excellent.
Yeah. All right. So with that, another sort of climate related project, Keon did a remarkable job on his research on figuring out how climate in the future in 2050 and 2070, how it can change sort of the expansion of habitats for spider monkeys. So I'm definitely excited to hear what he has to present.
Hello, my name is Kian, and I chose to study the change in the spider monkey's habitat in the years to come. Next. I chose the spider monkey because they're key to seed distribution and are very important for the reforestation of the Amazon. So I wanted to know how their ecosystem would change in the coming decades, and the results were very different across the board. My research question was, what will the spider monkey's ecosystem be in 2050 and 2070? The independent variables being years species, and location. The dependent variables being bioclim variables, aka minimum temperature of the coldest month, annual precipitation, the bioclim itself being the most widely used gauge for calculating hypothetical information on the environment. For my hypothesis, I predicted that each of the spider monkeys would see a significant decline in their habitat. My materials and methods, I used RStudio's Wallace application to conduct the research. First, I had to select the species and sample the population that I wanted to include, or that I could include. Then I collected the bioclim variables and finalized the borders of the environment. After dividing them into 4 different environmental groups, I ran a linear and linear quadratic model. With these results, I was able to show that I was able to project it on the map and into the future using CCSM4, the Community Climate System Model, the leading model for simulating Earth's environment. As of now, the spider monkeys that I did sample, the red-faced, white-bellied, and Peruvian spider monkeys, the red face is listed as vulnerable, while the white-bellied and Peruvian spider monkeys are both listed as endangered and are declining in population. From the red-faced spider monkey, in 2022, they see a significant decrease onto 2050, all the outlying populations being concentrated into the hotspot. And from 2050 to 2070, they see only a slight increase, very slight. From the white-bellied spider monkey, they see very little change overall. From 2020 to 2050, there's a slight increase in habitability. And from 2050 to 2070, there's a slight decrease in habitability. The Peruvian spider monkey changed the most, however, as it sees a major increase in habitable land in 2050 and a much more significant decrease in habitable land in 2070, seeing almost all of the habitable hotspots being cut in half. What I think about this information is that the red-faced spider monkey is an immediate concern, seeing as their land did increase by the least amount in 2070. The white-bellied spider monkey comparatively not being as much of a concern, seeing as their population changed very little overall. And the Peruvian spider monkey being a major concern for after 2050, as their population only declined. Their habitat only declined after 2050. My hypothesis was dead wrong, as they experienced very different change overall, and experienced so different change that there was no solid pattern in each of the studies that I found. That was how different they were. If I were to do future research onto this subject, I would definitely sample many more spider monkey species across the Amazon. This was only a small portion of them. And I would also dissect the nature of the environmental changes, as in why the habitat decreased as much as it did, and for the Peruvian and the red-faced, why the white-bellied didn't decrease as much, etc. And this is my work. Cited. Page.
All right, thank you, Kian. So I had a quick question. So why did you choose to do spider monkeys for your research?
Because they're key to seed distribution, and I thought the reforestation of the Amazon is pretty important right now and will be in the future. So, yeah.
And could you use this technique to look at other animals that live in the rainforest?
Absolutely, and not just the rainforest, all around the world, really.
Yeah, I thought go ahead.
Using Wallace, you can look into nearly any species of animal and project what their environment will look like in the future, or just what it is right now.
Yeah, I find it really fascinating that you picked an organism that's so important for an ecosystem across the world from you, where you were able to draw data from that. So that's just absolutely amazing. Well done on that.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely excellent work. And for everyone who's just kind of curious, he essentially created ecological niche models. So these models really do, given the specific data points and the localities. So if you have any locality data for any type of organism that you're studying, you can create these ecological niche models to sort of figure out, in geographic space, what's their preferred habitat. So, on the figures, the warmer colors represented the higher the likelihood you would find that particular organism, while the cooler colors represented the areas where you wouldn't find them. So it's a really unique and informative model to create. And great job, Keon.
Yeah, so we did have a question from the audience. So was slash and burn farming factored into habitat loss? Did you do any background research on that?
I didn't do any research on it, but for the Peruvian, that's really all I can think of if for how their population declined so much in 2070 would be just direct human development. I'm not sure if Wallace takes that into account, though.
And then one more question. How do we prevent them from disappearing? So the spider monkeys.
Well, stopping global warming, but that's a bit big for now.
To do, yeah. Well, and bringing awareness, just like what you just did now, is also a really great way to bring that to everybody's attention, that there are these kinds of issues going on. So providing data to the public as a scientist is a really great way to get that information out to help, bring species back and preserve their habitats.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Great job. That was very interesting. I was excited to see all of your work come together because DJ's been telling me all about the cool things you were doing. So well done.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, I am going to introduce Shuchi. So Shuchi was one of my students that I've worked with. Oop, that's the wrong one. I need to bring her up, not her presentation. All right. Hi, Shuchi. Welcome.
Hi, Miss Cotton. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. So Shuchi did a phenomenal job putting together a focus group to work with young teens to discuss the impact that social media has on some of the behaviors that they do in their everyday lives. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Shuchi go ahead and get started.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shuchi Shivangi, and my mentor is Miss Cotton. Today, I'll be presenting my research project titled Social Media and Eating Habits in Female Teens. Social media has helped the world's population maintain interconnectedness to their friends and family members around the globe. However, with all the interconnectedness that social media has to offer, there are some negative effects on it on female teenagers. I hypothesize that there is a negative pattern between social media and eating habits. This study uses qualitative research to find the relationship between social media and the eating habits of teenagers and to find whether there is a negative pattern. I aim to study the impact of social media on eating habits in this study. I also wanted to see how idealized body proportions weights, and eating habits promoted by social media impacted my generation. The research question was to find the relationship between social media and eating habits in female teens ages 14 to 17. The hypothesis for the research question was that social media would negatively affect the eating habits of the participants ages 14 to 17 and cause disordered eating along with body dysmorphia. The first part of my project consisted of the pre-survey. The pre-survey question, which was sent to females between ages 14 to 17, asked email and types of social media platforms used. Then, a parental consent survey was sent out to ensure that these participants had parental permission to participate in the research project. A focus group is a moderated discussion for research purposes. After participants were selected, an online focus group was conducted using the online platform Padlet, a tool where participants can anonymously respond to questions. A focus group needs to be moderated because it is for research purposes. My focus group was held on Zoom. The post survey was sent out to all the participants, which asked if there was anything the individual did not feel comfortable mentioning in the focus group. All responses in the Padlet were exported to a PDF, and the answers for each question were coded for positive, negative, and neutral answers. Then, a word cloud generator was used to find which words stood out. Some of the questions have been eliminated from the data sets in this presentation because their answers are irrelevant to the hypothesis. The purpose of the word association game, one of the eliminated questions, was to help the participants get a feel for the focus group and understand how it works. This is the table for question 2. The question was about how the pandemic made the participants feel about life. The respondents were divided between positive and negative. The responses were grateful, thankful, scared, and underwhelmed. Upon probe of grateful, the participant felt grateful to have good health. Upon probe of underwhelmed, the participant wrote that the pandemic caused anxiety and underwhelming feelings. These are the responses for question 4, which ranged from very positive to positive. Participants generally felt appreciated when people interacted with their posts or saw people uplifting others. Responses for question 5 were negative to very negative. When asked about a time that social media had made the participants feel insecure about themselves, the participants generally felt insecure when celebrities posted pictures of their bodies because natural bodies do not look like this. Also, participants were insecure when people posted college related content, such as colleges they got accepted or denied from, and their statistics. The majority of the responses in this question ranged from very positive to positive when the participants were asked about who they count on for social emotional support. The majority of the participants count on friends and family, while one participant stated that they count on no one for emotional support. When probed, they said that it makes them feel less alone but safe because nobody is there to judge them. In question 8, one response was positive, 3 responses were neutral, 2 responses were negative, and 1 response was very negative. When probed, the individuals who answered with negative answers said eating disorders, sad and relatable posts about influencers making teens feel insecure about their bodies. Regarding working out, participants answered on question 10 that they saw body positive content and quick, too good to be true solutions. The neutral answers in between consisted of workout apparel, gym clothes, and journeys of becoming fitter. The answers ranged from very positive to negative. On questions 11, the participants were asked to rate working out to lose weight from 1, the least useful, to 4, the most useful. The answers consisted from 1 neutral to 5 negative answers. On question 12, the responses were statistically higher than question 11. Question 12 asked the participants to rate working out to be healthier from 1 to 4, 1 being the least useful and 4 being the most useful. The participants who were probed said that working out to be skinny is just degrading on a person, and working out for my personal health always makes me feel more confident, and I also feel happier after exercising. The final question, question 13, asked participants to give their younger selves advice about social media. The responses range from positive to very negative answers. It can be inferred from this data that participants were clearly valuing being confident without social media and are clearly distrustful of social media. The respondents wrote answers from "Don't get Instagram and don't get TikTok" to "Be a kid, don't try to grow up faster because of what you see online." This is a word cloud generated from wordsclouds.com, which can help researchers analyze qualitative results and which words were more dominant. This is another word cloud created from the responses of question 5. This rationale for this experiment was that social media would negatively impact the eating habits of teen females. The data collected in the focus group ranged from positive, negative, and neutral. From this, I concluded that social media can positively and negatively affect the eating habits of females ages 14 to 17. The results of the experiment varied from the hypothesis. Patterns in the data included both positive and negative trends. The rationale was that social media would negatively affect the eating habits of female teens ages 14 to 17, but from the results, it can be concluded that social media can both positively and negatively affect the eating habits of female teens ages 14 to 17. Content on social media has the ability to be both body positive and related to encouraging disordered eating habits. When a participant said they've seen body positive content, this illustrates social media's ability to promote healthy standards, not just unhealthy ones. On question 7, a participant reported that they count on no one for emotional support. This question was relevant to the hypothesis because it provides insightful data on whether the participant has emotional support. And if they don't, then the participant would more be likely to be affected by negative content on social media than participants who do rely on someone for emotional support. On question 13, the question where participants were asked to give advice to their younger selves about social media, 2 answers stated, "Don't get TikTok and don't get Instagram." One said social media is completely fake. Another answer said, "Don't try to grow up faster because of what you see online." It can be inferred from these results that the participants were distrustful of social media and value living life without it. The results of the study varied from the hypothesis. Depending on the content, social media can be both positive and negative. When asked about posts seen on social media regarding working out, a participant wrote body positive content, while another wrote quick, too good to be true solutions. Although there was mostly a negative pattern between social media and eating habits, the data also showed some positive answers. From this data, I concluded that social media, depending on the content, can promote both disordered eating habits and body dysmorphia to body positivity and healthy eating habits. A future experiment can study the relationship between social media and mental health stigma. Social media would most likely both positively and negatively affect and combat the stigma surrounding mental health and mental health treatment. This is my Works Cited page. Thank you for listening to my presentation and have a great evening.
Great job, Shuchi. It's been a really fun journey watching you grow into getting all of this data. Shuchi spent a great deal of time working with an expert to work through creating her focus group and understanding that process, and took such care to make sure that everyone in her focus group was held anonymous and that nobody knew who they were. When working with young children and teenagers, it's important to make sure that they feel safe, and you did such a good job with doing that. So congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.
So I am very well connected with your presentation and your work, but I was going to see if DJ, you had any questions for Shuchi?
No, you did a fantastic job, and I admire all of the work that you put forth going into it. Yeah, doing these types of in-depth studies and even like thinking of the questions. That's a lot, and you just did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Very good job. And it is an important topic when talking about social media and the impact it can have on the youth today. Lots of things that are coming their way. So it was really interesting to see the stuff that came out of that. So great job. If you have any questions for Shuchi, you can put them in the comments. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next presentation. All right, Shuchi, you did a great job. You answered everybody's questions. Oh, wait, there's one. How did it feel to be a moderator for your focus group?
It did feel scary because I had enough expert advice to know exactly what I was doing. It should have felt a little bit scary because I was doing it for the first time, but with the experts' help, it really felt like second nature.
Yeah. So I guess I have a follow-up question on that. Since you did this whole project and you ran a focus group, is this something that you would want to do in the future?
Yes, definitely. Running a focus group allowed me to hear the opinions and remarks and comments from different people and hear their perspective and make sure their voices are heard. And that is research I'm interested in doing in the future.
It's great to hear.
Yeah,
You're gonna do great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I look forward to seeing where you go from here. And if you want to read more, she has a lot of information when we publish the paper in the Headwaters Journal. Make sure you follow on our social media. You can read all of the information that she collected because it's a lot of information. So very good job, Shuchi. Thank you so much. Well done. All right, up next, we have Carolyn. I did it again where I pulled up her presentation and not Carolyn. Hi, Carolyn.
Hello.
So Carolyn also did a study looking at the impact of social media. She too worked with an expert to work on different techniques and ways to, get this kind of data and information, especially in a time where it's difficult to work face to face with people, including young people. There's always that challenge of working with parents and making sure there's consent. And Carolyn did a very amazing job with working with the young people with social media as well. So Carolyn, I'm going to go ahead and let you take the wheel.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Carolyn Pian, and my mentor was Miss Cotton. And my research topic is social media's impact on self-esteem of local high schoolers. Next slide, please. Okay, so first I like to start with the definition of social media. So I like to define it as the web and the mobile platforms that allow connections with others via sharing like digital content. So primary forms of social media that we might be very familiar with is like YouTube, Instagram, or like Facebook or other such platforms. Yeah, so social media's use and popularity skyrocketed, and it's now part of most people's daily life with over like billions of people now using social media. And there has also been lots of studies that arose with this result on the impact of social media on mental well-being and mental health. And sometimes social media with negative mental health outcomes, and some support that there is no evidence for harm. And some actually also say that it actually helps with mental health issues. So there's a lot of variety of research and results done. So I wanted to explore like how does it affect my local area specifically. So I decided to specifically focus on Instagram because it is something that I know a lot of the people here use, and I also used to use a lot. And as you can see, a lot of people use Instagram. It's a very popular site. And also from personal experience, I experienced feeling happier when I was not using Instagram. And I also heard several accounts of other people who said that they also felt a greater increase in like self-esteem whenever they weren't using Instagram. So I wanted to put that to the test. So my research question is, how does social media, specifically Instagram, affect the emotional self-esteem of high schoolers in my local area, which is Saratoga? And the independent variable was the usage of social media, and the dependent variable was the self-esteem, emotions, and like the feelings of participants. And my hypothesis is that Instagram in general affects self-esteem negatively because people, especially teens, compare themselves with what others post, which often does not reflect reality. And I also wanted to kind of see the relationship between the follower count and whether that kind of corresponded with the self-esteem levels. So I also hypothesized that follower counts, more follower counts does not necessarily correlate with higher self-esteem or self-confidence, which I heard from people that they often like correlate the two. So what I did was that I created an online survey using Google Forms and had a multiple types of questions like the Likert scale and like ranking and like multiple choice. As you can see here, this is a Likert scale. It's like 1 to 5 and you just kind of rate it like that. And I also gathered a lot of different data like time, experiences, opinions, and self-esteem, just like screening. And I distributed to my local high school by weekly newsletters sent out via Gmail to all parents and students. And I opened up the forms for 2 weeks. And then I did all the data management and charts that you'll see in the next slides with Google Sheets. So the results, this is just kind of the demographic stuff. So I got 15 responses in total from Instagram users, and 14 of them use them on a daily basis, and one said they use it at a weekly basis. And if you look at the average time spent and the posting activity, they were actually pretty active on Instagram. So these were active Instagram users. So this is the first question. Why do you use Instagram? And as you can see, 100% actually responded that they use it for entertainment when they're bored. And if you include the look at cats kind of in like the entertainment column, entertainment portion of the data, then the least selected response was to share my life with others, which was actually a surprise to me because Instagram was actually initially created with a purpose to share like life with others, but now you can see it's kind of skewed towards more of a purpose of entertainment rather than sharing your life with others. So this is the second question. I just asked the general experience of Instagram users whenever they go on Instagram. And as you can see, it's a Likert scale ranging from negative to positive. And it was actually a very overwhelmingly positive response with like 100% of them saying like neutral to positive. So this kind of refutes my hypothesis because I thought that if people who got on Instagram had a lowering in self-esteem, then they would experience a bit more a negative influence. But then again, the question is very up to interpretation. So it could be that different people interpreted the question general experience of Instagram as going on or like after Instagram, like it could be different. But as you can see, regardless, there is still generally a positive experience of Instagram, which is something that I learned that's new. This is the responses to Instagram makes me feel insecure about myself. And as you can see, most of the people actually responded never to sometimes, which was also really surprising. And it kind of doesn't really support my hypothesis because if people did think that Instagram lowered their self-esteem, then it would be more in the sometimes always range. But it's not 100% incorrect because you can see there's one person who did say always, but the majority does not support that. And the next question also has similarly, I compare myself to others in Instagram. As you can see, the responses are pretty spread apart. So this also doesn't really support my hypothesis because I was expecting it to be more in towards the agree to strongly agree side. And this is another question to ask, have you felt jealous or envious of what other people post on Instagram? And 20% responded often to always, and 40% responded rarely to never. And this also doesn't really support my hypothesis because I thought I expected the rarely never range to be a lot smaller and the always and often to be a lot bigger than it is. This is another question that I kind of put out to kind of gauge whether people thought that whatever people post on Instagram and how they view themselves on Instagram is accurate to real life. And it was pretty interesting because the responses to who I am on Instagram depicts me in real life is pretty like spread out. But for responses for how they think others present themselves on Instagram, it's more skewed to the strongly disagree and disagree spectrum, which kind of supported my hypothesis in the part that many people believed that social media was not very, it wasn't a good representation of real life. It was a bit superficial. And this was, I asked them to rank the following: likes, followers, comments, views, close friends. So these are all like features in social media, in Instagram particularly. And I actually found it surprising that followers was ranked second after comments, which was ranked number 1. So that kind of refutes my hypothesis that a lot of people are very obsessed with followers, which I kind of saw within my observations, but it's not as much in the bigger like anonymous survey kind of type. And also, if you look at the questions that kind of gauge self-esteem in regards to the number of followers that a person has, then you can see that a higher follower count did not necessarily correlate with a higher self-satisfaction or like a higher self-confidence. And it actually suggests that the opposite might even be true. So this is just like all the stuff I said before, but it's just a lot of text. So can you just go to the next slide, please? And this is the same thing. Next slide, please. Okay. So some of the factors that kind of affects my data is, I think the biggest is the quantity of data, because I only got 15 people. So hopefully in the future, if I do future research, I could get more people. Also, my research kind of limited Instagram, so it's very not very encompassing the broad range of social media. And another thing is questions can be interpreted differently. Like another one strongly agree might not be another person's agree. And it's also focused on quantitative than like qualitative, because people ranked by numbers rather than like actually type out their response of what they think about it. So that is something that I think might have been a bit shortcoming when it comes to the gauging how people feel. And as you can see, the conclusion is that the results as shown by the data varies from hypotheses. Like some part is supported while others are not. For example, what's not is that the contrast in expectations on self-esteem question concludes that the correlation between Instagram usage and self-esteem is kind of weak in a local scale. And everything else that I talked about before is kind of supported. And I don't want to dive into that right now because I'm short on time. And here's some future research. So with this research, I think it would also be interesting to go and get data on non-Instagram or non-social media using teens to see if I can compare them with one another. And another thing is, of course, expanding to other social media platforms, because Instagram's not the only social media, and also expanding to other areas, not only the local area. And I kind of did the follower numbers, but also maybe seeing how age and private and public accounts affect responses. And another one thing is, I think it would be also interesting to see how people who want regulation on like Instagram, for example, I very strictly follow like a screen time kind of reminder kind of thing. So I think it would be also interesting to see how these people think of these features in Instagram, like the self screen time reminder feature on Instagram. This is my work cited. And thank you so much for listening. Do you have any questions?
Great job, Carolyn. I love the, I go on there to look at cats because I too go on Instagram to look at cats. I had a quick question. So do you think that the addition of adding Reels to Instagram may have influenced the results that you saw in your study?
I think definitely, like, especially with like the huge popularity boom of TikTok, as we all know, like it's kind of, Reels is kind of very similar to TikTok in a way that it's like a lot more like short videos. So probably people definitely think the entertainment based question is a lot more, might have been a lot more people who chose that multiple choice because of like the Reels on Instagram. So that's what I think, but I gotta do more research on that if I want to confirm it. So
yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they just didn't look at Reels for that week and just looked at Instagram on their feed. If your results would be different, because I find myself on that side of social media just to kind of have a brain break and shut down for a minute and, you know, look at cats. So we do have a question from the public here. So do you think that the study participants were biased in favor of the platform? And did that lead to more favorable answers?
I think it's definitely possible, but I also saw like a big range in like there was one person who said that like they don't always believe that they always think that social media like affects their insecurity. So I think it's like a mix of people. I think it could have been biased though, because I did see like a lot of positive results that kind of contradicted my hypotheses. And so again, it would be better if I had like a greater range of people who filled out the survey so that I could have more to compare with, because I only have 15 people.
And then another one, would age impact responses?
Well, the research I did was specifically focusing on like 9th graders to 11th graders. So that's like a 4-year gap. When I actually also like surveyed the ages, but when I looked at the ages, there weren't that many like discrepancies, I guess, compared to like when I divided them by like follower numbers. So age, I think, could have impacted the resource responses, but for that, I think it would be better to be like a broader, like maybe like middle school or elementary school. I don't know if elementary schools can use Instagram, but like middle schoolers or like college students, but maybe solely focusing on high schoolers is not as much because it's only a 4-year gap.
Yeah, elementary school kids are 100% on social media. Not so much like Instagram, but they definitely go on TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
They know all the dances. DJ, do you have any questions for Carolyn?
Faith actually asked my question. I was kind of curious on what you think the responses would be if, say, okay, so not focusing on kids, I guess. What about 30-year-olds plus or 50-year-olds plus? What do you think their responses would be like?
Well, that is an interesting point. I think that maybe they would be. I think maybe I would get similar responses. I don't know. My mindset kind of changed after I saw the responses from teens, because I thought like teens would be very like sensitive to like all the self-esteem and like what Suchi said in her previous research, right? Like how people because she also focused on like teens. So I thought like teens would be a lot more affected, but my research kind of shows that it's not as much. So maybe I'm thinking adults would be similar.
Yeah, yeah, because for me, just anecdotally, I mean, my father would tend to use social media in the honest way where he's actually trying to, show people what's going on and on in life and not necessarily about entertainment. But yeah, it seems just there's a different mindset when using it.
And doing a study with a more mature group is how we're going to say it nicely, would be to look at Facebook, because that's what I know. My parents are on Facebook. A lot of people I know that are in that age group tend to, like DJ saying, use it for what it was intended to be used for. So that may be a really interesting study moving forward. Great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so with that, we are going to wrap up for the evening. DJ, thank you so much for all the work that you did with the students. I could not have gotten through all this without you. You are such a vital tool for us. So I very much appreciate you and helping us with these kids.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
So if you would like to participate in our summer program, it kicks off on June 14th. You can go ahead and register on our websites. We still have spaces available, and you can go ahead and do research from your home out in the field. And like you saw at Keon, you could study something that's completely across the world from you. And with Shuchi and Caroline, these are things that they were doing virtually and able to get all of their data, studying hurricanes, out in the ocean. So there's so many things that you as a student can do while you're in school to get this hands-on research, as well as end up getting published. So if you have any questions regarding this program, please feel free to email me at jen@headwaterscienceinstitute.org. I will be so excited to hear from you and answer any questions that you have. So with that, we are going to go ahead and end our presentation. Students, if you could just stay on really quick and have a great night.